Hostages and prisoners were on everyone's mind this week, as Israeli hostages were exchanged for Palestinian prisoners in a temporary ceasefire. And while Israel sees innocent children exchanged for terrorists, what does the rest of the world see? And was it worth it? This is Today Unpacked's This Week Unpacked by Unpacked. My name is Micah Smith. I'm a producer on our sister channel, Unpacked. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's worth it. Today we're trying a new format here where we're going to catch you up on what happened this week and then pick a few stories from the week and see how they're being told from news outlets from around the world. We'll also have some guests, and we'll give you a heads up on what's going on in the largest book club in the world. Chapter 1, the wrap-up. A ceasefire, hostages and prisoners released, increased aid into Gaza, and then an extension to the ceasefire as many ask, what's next? We'll explore this more later. Reports continue to come out about Israeli intelligence soldiers who predicted the October 7th attack, but had their warnings dismissed by senior officers. Elon Musk visited Israel amidst his ongoing battle with the Anti-Defamation League, who accuses X of being a safe haven for anti-Semitic content. Musk wasn't the only notable visitor to Israel. A Qatari delegation landed in Tel Aviv as the oil-rich nation continues to play a critical role in negotiations between Israel and Hamas, despite not recognizing Israel's existence. And in the US, Jewish institutions are stepping up security after a spike in anti-Semitic incidents, including an attack on the home of the head of Israel lobbying group, AIPAC, and vandalism at University of Florida's Chabad. 3 Palestinian college students were shot. The motive of the attacker is still unclear, but what is clear is that violence like this spreads terror and hate, which personally I think we have enough of these days, and maybe we could even bring it down a notch. What do you say? And on social media, the trending topics include Palestinian supporters claiming Israeli hostages were treated great, while Palestinian prisoners were treated horribly, and Israel supporters hitting back, both on the comparison of Israeli hostages to Palestinian terrorists,
that she wanted to die a martyr before going and stabbing an Israeli in the head. This is Amelia Aloni. She's 5.
and debunking some of the claims that prisoners were mistreated. Wrapping up the wrap-up, we move on to Chapter 2, What's Everyone Saying? This week, everyone's talking about hostages, detainees, prisoners, captives. Yeah, we can't even agree on what to call them. So for example, while the English language and Israeli media is referring to the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian prisoners, Arabic media is avoiding the word hostage, rahina, and instead referring to both Israelis and Palestinians as prisoners, usra.
I can't believe you would equate that
Don't bite
with...
my head off. I'm not a pack of batteries.
Israeli media is mostly focusing on the hostages released from Gaza and sharing information about the terrible experiences of the hostages. Videos show Hamas terrorists telling detainees to wave, which they then use as potent propaganda footage that Hamas released to the world, claiming that hostages actually appreciated Hamas. Amazingly, some people out there are actually fooled by this, or perhaps they are complicit in spreading these lies.
You really believe that?
For the most part, Israeli media is only covering Palestinian prisoners released if A, it's a famous prisoner, B, it's a prisoner whose release is being objected to because, for example, they live next door to the Israeli they stabbed, C, or if it's a prisoner claiming to have been mistreated but there's footage debunking the claim. Not surprisingly, Arabic media is telling a very different story. Arabiya, for example, published video footage of Israelis released, which it then juxtaposed with 30 children that had been released from occupation prisons. To be clear, they're not Israeli prisons, they are occupation prisons. Really driving those keywords home. Qatar-based Al Jazeera quoted an underage detainee alleging beatings every day. London and United Arab Emirates-based Sky News Arabic ran a piece on Palestinians who've been imprisoned since they were minors, but as is common in Arabic media, avoids saying what crimes they committed or refers to the crimes as alleged. In the context of highly publicized Hamas propaganda that included a thank you letter written by a captive, I'm sure they weren't under duress in any way when they were writing that, the article suggests that Israel has something to hide when it notes, and while Palestinian prisoners, women, and children have spoken with news media on the occasion of their freeing, Israeli authorities have prevented its prisoners from making any press statements until Saturday morning. Yeah. The Arabic media is suggesting that Israel's bureaucratic democracy is actually just a thin veneer for unlawful brutality against children, and that the Palestinians being released are simultaneously proof of Israel's evil and justified freedom fighters against the occupation. In other words, the prisoners didn't do anything, but if they did, it would be justified.
Dude, you can have your cake and eat it too.
As a New York Times op-ed pointed out, the creation of these incredibly distinct narratives creates a lethal psychological chasm between Israelis and Palestinians, and I should say their respective supporters around the world. So is there any good news? Well, the good news is we're moving on to Chapter 3, Zooming Out. In this section, we zoom with a guest who zooms out and gives us some perspective on these dueling narratives. This week, Yirmiyahu Danzig, host of our sister channel, Unpacked. Can you give us some perspective on what's driving the narrative in the Arabic and pro-Palestinian media?
After the events of October the 7th, Hamas dealt with a serious blow to its international reputation, with people throughout, not just the Western media, but also Arab media, comparing Hamas directly to ISIS.
Hamas is ISIS.
And so a lot of this media campaign that's been done by Hamas has been to redeem their reputation by trying to paint a moral equivalency between the IDF and Israel and Hamas. And so this is what we're seeing with the prisoner exchange. They're saying that Israel has prisoners and we have prisoners, or Israel has hostages and we have hostages, and we're going to be making an exchange because both of these hostages were taken in similar circumstances. And that's a false moral equivalency, because despite the fact that there is serious moral question that Israeli society has to ask in terms of how we deal with minors that commit acts of violence and terror, that can't be compared to Israeli children and elderly and mothers and fathers being violently ripped out of their homes.
And if you were to zoom out, what are the bigger issues at play that people should consider when thinking about what started the war, what's continuing the war, and hopefully what will eventually end the war?
Look, the broader context of the October 7th massacre was deep Palestinian frustration with the Abraham Accords. And the fact that we were so close to finally having a deal with the Saudis, which would completely change not only the broader region, but also the relationship between the broader Arab world and the Arab leadership, the Palestinians and Israel, was something that Hamas couldn't deal with, right? Hamas couldn't accept that reality, because then it would mean that the military option, the option of destroying Israel, would be completely off of the table. And they would be eclipsed by new organizations, new structures, which would improve Palestinian life. And that would mean that their Islamist Iranian proxy vision for a region without Israel, without Zionism, would be over. And so that's why they felt like they couldn't wait to do this attack. They had to do it right now to end the deal that was on the table. I think what they're very concerned with is it seems that the Saudis and the other Arab allies in the Abraham Accords aren't budging. They're still standing with Israel in their own unique way.
Yirmiyahu, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Moving on to Chapter 4, Ask a Bubby. That's right. In this section, we bring on a bubby, or Safta, Teta, Nona, Grandma, to do what bubbies were made for. Give us some wisdom and make us smile. So are you a bubby, a Safta, a Grandma, a Nona?
I don't care what they call me as long as they love me.
This week I asked paradigmatic bubby, Fagi Bedell, what we can do in order to get through the emotional roller coaster of these hostage releases.
I'm taking my glasses off so that maybe they can focus better on my eyes. Well, watching the hostages come free and seeing how strong they are and seeing these older women who have they're like lionesses. They were amazing. It's a miracle that they got out alive, and it's a miracle that they can function at all. And that for me is a light at the end of excuse me for this expression, but that the light at the end of that tunnel. I think what we have to do is focus on each other and focus on supporting one another, because when we support one another, God watches and he sees it. And he says, I cannot abandon my children when they're there for each other.
Thanks so much, Safta Fagi. Chapter 5, the largest book club in the world. If you want to keep up to date on what's going on with the Jews, the news is critical, but we also have this weekly book club, which literally keeps us all on the same page. That's right, I'm talking about the weekly Torah reading, or Parsha, that's being read in temples, synagogues, shuls all over the world. So just to give you a heads up on what to look for this week, I asked Yirmiyahu Danzig, where's the meat in this week's Parsha?
So the meat of this week's Parsha that I think directly speaks to this current moment in history is Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, being kidnapped by the leadership and the people of Shechem and abused, and Jacob's son's retribution on the city by slaughtering all of the male inhabitants. And then Jacob, and by extension, the leadership of the Jewish people for posterity, wrestling with the moral consequences of their actions.
Moving on, Chapter 6, Looking Ahead. Keep an eye out next week for the likely resumption of the war and how your news outlet is explaining why it's restarted and what kind of narrative they're building and for what purpose. Remember, it's often not a question of whether or not what you're being told is true, but what is it that you're not being told? It's the inclusion and removal of facts that ends up being the process through which these news outlets build a narrative. And that's Today Unpacked's This Week Unpacked by Unpacked. Considering the new format, drop us a line in the comments, give us any suggestions, thoughts, ideas, and let us know what word you use to refer to your bubby.